Okay, after the sessional, we are back with ENA. There had been some delay. It was due to some personal reasons, but I am going to cover the course that have been left behind. So up till now, we have looked at how Laplace transform can be used for circuit solution, and I hope you guys have adequately understood that the application of the Laplace transform, or for that matter any transform, has similar procedure to solve a circuit. So what we do is we have the circuit and we have the problem, and when we say problem, it means obviously a circuit problem, um, circuit analysis problem in time domain. We convert it to the frequency domain by the application of the transform. We convert the problem to the, so the problem is converted in frequency domain, and when we do this conversion, basically we convert each voltage mentioned in the original circuit to its equivalent Laplace transform expression. We convert all the currents that we encounter to their equivalent Laplace transform. We convert the R's to R's and L's to SL's, and with a voltage source or a current source depending upon what we choose, and similarly the C's to 1 over SC's with some voltage source or current source depending upon. These two things depend on the initial conditions or the initial state of the of inductor or capacitor, and then we convert all the sources as well, that is covered in converting these voltages and currents. Then what we do is we solve in frequency domain to find whatever we need to find, and come up with a result in frequency domain. Then we employ techniques to find, using partial fractions mostly, we write the frequency domain result in a way that transform table can be used to find inverse transform. So once the expression in the frequency domain is adequately written, we apply the inverse Laplace transform to find the result in time domain. So up till now we have seen this procedure at work, and so just to brush up, let me take a very simple problem. So let us say we have a RC network. So this side is an input side, and we say some input voltage is connected here, and across the capacitor is what we are interested to find the output. So given this RC network, if we apply VIT here, and VOT is the parameter that we are interested in. So what we are interested in a circuit is known as the output, and the input is usually a source, a voltage source or a current source, and what we may be interested in is a voltage or a current as well. So there can be four cases. The input is the voltage, output is voltage, input is current, output is current, input is voltage, output is current, or input is current, output is voltage. So it can be any of these four cases that we are usually interested in dealing in the circuit. So if we now apply a Laplace transform on this circuit, and let us say the initial voltage on the capacitor is 0 just before t is equal to 0, that is, the capacitor is not initially energized. In this case, if we convert this whole problem in the first step to the frequency domain, we get an R here, we get an impedance 1 over SC here, and this V naught T converts to V naught of S, and this VIT converts to VI of S, capital V is now. So this is the Laplace transform of the input, this is the Laplace transform of the output, and this is the equivalent circuit representation in the frequency domain. Then we can solve this circuit in frequency domain to find what is VO of S. And if we can see that this is a voltage divider network. We have some voltage appearing here, and then the voltage appearing here is of interest to us, that we can very easily see that VO of S can, V naught of S can be written as VI of S into, because it is across 1 over SC, so 1 over SC impedance divided by the total impedance in the voltage divider network. So we can very easily see that this is going to be the output expression for the output in frequency domain. Because there was no initial voltage on the capacitor, so we don't put any voltage source in series or a current source in parallel. That depends on the initial conditions. So we have a simpler circuit to solve in the frequency domain, and we can easily solve, because the network is a very simple one. We can find this expression very easily. If it would have been a complicated one, we would apply all the circuit solution techniques that we know, source transformation, node voltage method, and mesh current method, and whatever, and ultimately come up through the solution to this expression for the output. Now there are a few terms that are very important, and we are going to see and learn those terms in the context of solving these simple problems, and they are very important ones to know, so please pay close attention. You can see that in the writing of this expression, we are not really concerned about the type of input voltage source. So if this voltage source was a constant voltage source applied at t is equal to 0, then we would have gotten this as that constant divided by S to be the Laplace transform of the input voltage transform. And if this would have been an exponential source, for example, we would have gotten 1 over S plus the coefficient with t in that exponent. And if this would have been a sinusoidal source, we would have obtained the corresponding expression here. And then we would have this thing here. Then we could use the partial fractions to elaborate this on this and find ultimately the output in the frequency domain. However, if we you can perhaps look at this, that if we just write this ratio of the output to the input, we get something that is independent of what the input is. So this ratio of the output to the input in the frequency domain gives us an expression that strictly depends on the components used in the circuit and not on what the input is, what the output is. This has a very, very important role in circuit analysis, and we express this ratio as something as called the transfer function. So h of s is called the transfer function. The name has the logic behind it. So basically h of s tells how the input gets transferred to the output. So knowing this transfer function, for any vi of s we can find vo of s. So once we know this, we just find the Laplace transform of the input, multiply it with the transfer function, and we get the output, the Laplace transform of the output. So transfer function is one of the very important key concepts that are of interest in circuit analysis, especially where in future we will see that where we are varying the frequency of the input. We will look at this later on, but right now you should know that the transfer function is a frequency domain concept where the transfer function is the ratio of the Laplace transform of the output to the Laplace transform of the input. So if the output is a voltage, input is a voltage, we have V's here, and they can be I's, they can be V's, any combination of that. So a particular circuit can have up to 4 type of transfer functions depending upon whether the input is a current or voltage and whether we are interested in a current or voltage as output. So the same circuit is going to have a different transform if we are looking at a different thing. So for example, if the same circuit, if in the same circuit we are interested in finding this IT, so IT would be our output, then the transfer function in this case would be the output in the numerator and the input in the denominator. So for the same circuit, nothing has changed except that we have termed the output to be a different thing. We get a different transfer function. This obviously is not going to be, so while this is 1 over SC over R plus 1 over SC, which we can simplify by bringing this SC down and multiplying it throughout to write this as 1 over SCR plus 1. And then there are other ways of writing this as well. So most of the time we are interested in having the coefficient of this S to be 1, not CR, 1. So if we write it in this way, that all the S in the denominator or in the numerator as well have this S alone with coefficient 1, then obviously how we are going to achieve this, we will take this CR common out and we will be left with 1 over CR in the numerator over S plus 1 over CR in the denominator. So this is a way of writing, and this will become clear later on, but this method of writing a transfer function or expressions in the Laplace transform while solving circuits is of particular interest, especially when we are dealing with circuits that have input with varying frequency. So let us try to always come up with expressions in this form, wherever there is S in the numerator or the denominator, we have these first order terms with s plus something, and this coefficient must be 1. So if we are interested in the current divided by voltage, we can easily see that this I would be equal to, let me just write it here first. So when we transform this in the frequency domain, we will write this as Is, and now we can see that Is would be equal to this voltage divided by the total impedance. So Vi of S over R plus 1 over SC. So what will I over Vi of S be is 1 over R plus 1 over SC. Once again, we are interested in writing the expression in this form, that S, whether in the denominator or the numerator, we get the coefficient of S to be 1. So we can see that we can write this as SC over SCR plus 1. Take the LCM SC here and goes to the numerator, and this can be written as, so C is a constant, we can take it out, or we can bring this down as well, and we can have S over, so S has the coefficient 1, and here S with the coefficient 1 requires us to take CR out, and we are going to get 1 over CR here, which is actually equal to 1 over R into S over S plus 1 over CR. So if we compare these two enclosed expressions, we see that the denominator term is the same, S plus 1 over CR, S plus 1 over CR, but we have S here in the numerator, no S here, and some constant multiplying with the whole expression. So we see the transfer function for the same circuit is different if we are looking at different inputs or different outputs. So one thing is very, very important. So you should know that for finding the transfer function, there should be no initial voltage on capacitors and no initial current in inductors. This is very important. So transfer function is only found without the initial conditions. So H of S is only found when initial conditions are, when all initial conditions are 0. This is very, very important. So once again, you should know that why a transfer function is called transfer function. It is because if we try to represent this circuit as a system, as a black box, and then an input is applied here and an output is received on this side, if we show systems using this block, this box diagram, with the inputs always drawn on the left, if we have to just represent one system, then input is always drawn on the left, although it's not mandatory, and the arrow tells with what is the input and what's the output. But this is the usual way we are going to describe it. And if X of S is the input and Y of S is some output, then the transfer function is something that can be written in the box. Why? Because it describes what the system is in terms of the system elements. So HFS only has C and R for this system. So whatever is the input is not part of the transfer function, and the transfer function tells how the input gets transferred to the output. So the output is the transfer function multiplied by the input. So that is how transfer function is described. In another way, the transfer function is basically the ratio of the output to the input in the frequency domain. That's it. So today, in the furthering of our study in solving circuits using Laplace transform, we have learned about the transfer function h of s. A transfer function will always be represented by h of s, and with no other alphabet, unless we are too crammed to use h of s, and we can represent the transfer functions with some other alphabet, but that is usually not done. We can use the subscript h1 and h2, etc. So I hope you have understood what a Laplace transform is, or what a transfer function is. There is two other terminologies to be understood, and in the continuation of the lecture 14.1, let me describe those as well. So for example, for the transfer function that we just encountered, 1 over CR over S plus 1 over CR or RC, we can see that if S has a value of infinity, the whole transfer function will become 0. So for all the values of S for which the transfer function becomes 0, then those values of S are called zeros. So what is a zero? Zero is a value of S for which the transfer function becomes 0. And if you look closely at this expression, if S is equal to minus 1 over CR, what is going to happen to H of S? So H of S is going to become infinity. So here the values of S for which H of S become very, very large or extremely large or infinity are called, those values of S are called poles. So zeros and poles are two terms, two concepts that you need to learn here as well. So you can also say that apart from some extreme values, the roots of the denominator polynomial are poles. So for example, in this expression, the denominator polynomial, let us write it as d of s, is s plus 1 over CR. In order to find the roots, we need to equate this to 0, and we can see that this gives us s is equal to minus 1 over RC. So you see, this is a pole. This value is a pole. Why? Because the function rises to a large value at this point. A pole is there. And similarly, with this definition, we will soon see that the roots of the numerator polynomial are called zeros. So in this case, we don't have a numerator polynomial, there is no s here. So basically there is no finite zero here. We have only one zero, and that is at s is equal to infinity. So we cannot draw s is equal to infinity, but there is a way of describing drawing these poles and zeros in a diagram that is known as a pole zero diagram, or as your book says, it is called a pole zero constellation or a pole zero constellation diagram. Generally, I refer to it as a pole zero diagram. A pole zero diagram is drawn in the S plane, but we will say it is a pole zero diagram, or we can write it as the S domain, S domain, or the complex plane. We already are familiar what is the complex plane, and I might have given this hint to you somewhere that this S is a complex frequency, and it is usually written in this way, where the real part is some alpha and the imaginary part is the radian frequency. This is the attenuation factor, coefficient or factor. This is the radian frequency with units in radian per second. The attenuation factor has units in Nepper per second, and the complex frequency has units in complex radians per second. Let us say it is in radian per second as well. So basically all of these three quantities have units in per second. This is just to remember what we are referring to, the radians or the Neppers or the complex radians or something else. I will look it up if there is a different name for these parameters, and I might have used a different name in my previous lectures, because we tend to remember one of the names and forget what the others are. However, because this S is a complex quantity with real part and imaginary part, therefore we draw the values of S in the complex plane, also called the S plane, not the S domain, sorry, the S plane. So this plane is known as S plane or the complex plane, and we draw the pole zero diagram on it. What are the poles and zeros? Values of S. Because they are the values of S, therefore they can be represented in this plane somewhere. So for example, look at this one, this value of S. R is a positive value, C is a positive value. So 1 over minus 1 over a positive value into a positive value is going to be a overall a negative value. So in this plane, when S and a negative real value, so in this plane a negative real value is represented. What is the real values? So omega is 0 in this case, and it is all alpha. So we are going to get this value on the negative side of this x-axis, or called the sigma axis. And because this is a 0 here, we need to represent it as a 0. So what we draw here is a 0 around this value. So to tell this is a 0 here. What about the pole? In this case, we don't have a finite pole. We have one pole, but that is at s is equal to infinity. We cannot draw that here. But if suppose, so let us take up to infinity. Suppose this point is infinity. So if we would have to draw the pole here, we draw that pole with a cross. So this is the graphical depiction of a pole and a zero. So this is for the circuit that we were studying, but if I now ask you to find the poles and zeros for some transfer function, say that is s into s plus 1, say there is some constant here as well, over s plus s. S cannot occur in both denominator and numerator. Say s plus 2 into s plus 3 square. Suppose this is a general transfer function, a complicated one, but suppose it is there. How we have arrived to this is not of importance right now. Suppose this is a transfer function and you are asked to find the poles and zeros for this and draw a pole zero diagram. So what you will do, you are going to find all the roots of the numerator polynomial and all the roots of the denominator polynomial. So all the zeros would be roots of the numerator polynomial, and those values would be when s is 0, s is 0, when s is minus 1. These two are the zeros. What about the poles? The roots of the denominator polynomial. So we have minus 2 as a pole and minus 3 and minus 3. Because this is squared, we have two poles at minus 3. And then that extreme values as well. So if s becomes infinity, you can see if s becomes infinity, we must first try to understand that what are we going to get when s becomes very large. So for a very large value, s plus 1 would be as good as s, and for a very large value, s plus 2 would be as good as s plus 3 would be as good as s. So we are going to get this whole expression like 10s square over s cube, which is 10 over s. So for very large values of s, for s much greater than unity, we are going to get h of s roughly equal to 10 s square over s cube, which would be equal to 10 over s. So if s is equal to infinity, we are going to get h of s equal to 0. So it means we have a 0 at infinity as well. We don't have a pole at s is equal to 0, s is equal to infinity. So how to represent all these in a pole 0 diagram? We draw the s-plane, and at 0 we have a 0, at minus 1 we have a 0, and then at infinity we don't draw actually the non-finite values, and then at minus 2 we are going to have a pole, and then at minus 3 we are going to have a double pole. Either we draw it in some way or just write it that we have a double pole here. So let us draw it some way as well. So at minus 3 we have a double pole, minus 2 we have a pole, and this is in the s-plane. This is the pole 0 diagram. So up to, till now you should just know that there are zeros and poles. What is the significance of knowing where we have a pole and where we have a 0? We will come to that later on. And one thing you will soon come to know and understand and appreciate is that most of the time the poles that we encounter for practical systems would lie in on this side of the vertical axis, and we call this the left hand plane, and this one the right hand plane. So most of the time we are going to encounter the poles of a practical real system to be in the left hand plane, Sometimes the poles can be at origin, but they usually never go in the right hand plane. This is very important. If we have a pole in the right hand plane, then that system may not be a stable system. We are going to discuss a little bit about stability later on. For now, just note that for stable systems, the poles must lie at in the left half plane or at max at the origin. This is it. So we have learned about poles and zeros and the transfer function in this lecture number 14.1. We will come to discuss more about the transfer functions and poles and zeros and their significance. What is the benefit of knowing that, okay, this is the pole, these are the pole zeros, or the pole, this is the pole zero diagram. What does it tell about the stability of the system and how would the system behave, and etc., etc. We will come to talk about that later on.